void discovered in the Great Pyramid of Giza has sparked curiosity and intrigue among both archaeologists and the public alike. The media has portrayed the find as fascinating, mysterious, and a cause for further exploration, while prominent archaeologists controlling the narrative are trying their hardest to curtail the excitement. Claiming that this is anything but a discovery, these archaeological stalwarts want to prevent any challenge to what they believe is the truth behind the pyramid's construction and purpose, while also covering up how little they really know. A project called Scan Pyramids employed a technology that used cosmic radiation to X-ray the Great Pyramid of Giza, also known as the Pyramid of Khufu. The technology tracks muons, particles that are similar to electrons but slightly heavier as they bombard the Earth, penetrating matter and slowly decaying. Using machines that can detect these particles, the team of scientists at Scan Pyramids monitored muons hitting the pyramids, noticing an excess of energized particles in a particular spot inside the pyramid. This provided evidence of a void about 100 feet long that could be anything from a chamber to a tunnel or just empty space. This muon monitoring machine isn't novel, though the technology surrounding it is improving. It has been used since the 1960s, when Dr. Luis Alvarez used the technology to search for chambers in the Chevron Pyramid at Giza. Though they're not making any extravagant claims about the discovery, while using an ambiguous word to describe it, that hasn't stopped others from completely invalidating their find. Zahi Hawass, the de facto mouthpiece of the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities and the mainstream narrative of Egyptology, said that this recent discovery doesn't contribute anything to our understanding. They found nothing. This paper offers nothing to Egyptology. Zero, Hawass said. Whether or not this discovery turns out to be profound or provides insights into how the pyramids were built is somewhat irrelevant for the sake of this argument. What is relevant is the tone of Hawass's statement and his completely discouraging sentiment. Firstly, any previously unknown void inside the pyramid that hasn't been explicitly mapped or included in the known schema is a discovery, even if the void isn't incredibly surprising because it was theorized or expected to be there. That doesn't negate evidence of its existence and the fact that it was discovered. This type of attitude not only discourages action to investigate what the void could possibly be, but it also dampens any motivation to examine other areas of the pyramids that could have previously unknown characteristics. Hawass's statement is reflective of his authoritarian control of Egyptology in general. Over the course of his career, he's come under considerable criticism, including legal action that almost resulted in jail time for a number of transgressions related to his work. Known for his egocentricity and ostentatiousness, he has used his position to make a fortune, often ignoring conflicts of interest between his government role and private payments. Meanwhile, he's known for denying credible archaeologists the opportunity to study the pyramids, while pushing them for speculating about their discoveries without first deferring to him. He has a reputation of holding a tyrannical rule over Egyptology, while commanding media coverage and taking credit for discoveries without mentioning the organizations that funded them. He's bypassed major museums that refuse to charge extra for what he deems to be exceptional exhibits, while also endangering Egyptian antiquities by shipping them overseas without the Egyptian government's consent. It is this type of attitude controlling the narrative around ancient Egypt and the pyramids that is so quick to cast doubt on any new and exciting discoveries. At the same time, Hawass is credited with changing the perception of Egyptology from a dull, abstract study to the exciting and mysterious reputation it has today, just as long as he's at the forefront of any major revelations. Whether one accepts the dominant narrative that the pyramids were built by the Egyptians for Pharaoh Khufu or some alternative theory boils down to personal belief. But the reality is that there isn't a truly solid explanation that is widely agreed upon. There are holes in every theory, and often the competing ones are devised by archaeologists with limited understanding of engineering or vice versa. The story that most of us were taught in school involves the slave labor of thousands of men moving massive stone blocks, chiseled by wooden mallets that were somehow dragged up a ramp to construct a 455-foot pyramid. We were told that it was built as a tomb for this mysterious pharaoh, of whom little is known, and filled with all the necessary accoutrements for his journey into the afterlife. What we weren't told is that the whole theory of the pyramid's construction being ordered by and for Khufu is based on one piece of potentially spurious evidence, found by a man who was running out of funding and desperate to make a discovery. Could Richard Weiss have forged the cartouche that supposedly marked the Great Pyramid as Khufu's? Probably. The other details that are left out are the numbers that show just how astounding it would have been for a civilization that didn't use wheels to construct such a gargantuan and perfectly engineered structure. The fact that 2.3 million stone blocks, ranging from 2.5 to 80 tons, were transported 500 miles before even being set into place is astounding. And we're told that the pyramid was built in around 20 years, meaning tens of thousands of laborers would have had to have worked both night and day, setting one stone in place about every 3 to 5 minutes to achieve this feat. While they were moving these massive stones with very primitive technology, there had to have been many highly talented engineers overseeing the process so that they could achieve the perfect orientation and accuracy of its dimensions, an accomplishment that would be incredibly difficult today with modern technology. The Great Pyramid is oriented precisely to the true cardinal directions, just slightly off by 4/60th of a degree. The opening of the joints between the massive stone blocks is on average 0.5 millimeters wide. The ratio of the perimeter to the height of the pyramid is accurate to better than 0.05%, and the base of the pyramid is completely flat to within 0.6 inches. This comprehension of mathematics is mind-boggling, as is the fact that there was no discovery of the concept of pi for another couple of thousand years, but they would have had to have used it with this level of construction. Even the ancient Greeks debated over how the pyramids were built. After Herodotus visited ancient Egypt in 450 BC, he returned believing machines were involved, though it's unclear what those machines were. This is the information that isn't often mentioned or known about by the vast majority of people, who simply take it as a fact that a primitive society was able to manage such an engineering marvel. Was it actually possible to execute this with such base technology? Maybe, but there seems to be some piece of the puzzle missing, and discovering the search for the truth is not beneficial to anyone, except those who wish to control the narrative for their own personal reasons or a larger, concerted restriction of knowledge. Of the many accounts in the Bible of strange happenings and otherworldly occurrences, the story of Ezekiel is one of the more fascinating, especially when looked at through the lens of modern technology. When biblical texts are interpreted through this perspective in general, an interesting picture emerges of the possibility that our ancient ancestors were actually visited by an advanced race rather than gods. This idea, known as the ancient astronaut theory, sees Ezekiel's vision of the Merkaba, or wheeled chariot, as more likely to be a spaceship or space shuttle used by an advanced species to reach out to humans. Erich von Däniken is one of the biggest proponents of this theory, providing a very compelling argument for an alternative interpretation of the book of Ezekiel. So compelling that his theory even reversed the entire theses of a NASA scientist book aimed at disproving his claim. In the 1970s, Erich von Däniken was invited to a secret speech at NASA where he met Joseph M. Blurich. The two spoke about von Däniken's ancient astronaut theory from his book Chariots of the Gods, notably the idea that Ezekiel's vision was that of a space shuttle rather than a divine chariot. This conversation led Blumrich on a mission to disprove von Däniken's seemingly absurd theory. So he did some research of his own and started writing a book. However, the evidence was overwhelming and Blumrich had an epiphany. Ezekiel was undoubtedly describing an advanced spacecraft. Blumrich even used Ezekiel's description of the craft to patent his own version of an omnidirectional wheel. Ezekiel is a key figure in Judaism, and is also prominent in other Abrahamic biblical texts. Ezekiel was brought to Babylon in the first captivity of Israel and is described as a prophet. One of the interesting characteristics of the book of Ezekiel as a biblical text is that it is written using the pronoun I, clearly showing it is written by Ezekiel himself as a first-person account, unlike many biblical texts written in the third person. This seems to lend a little more credit and personality to the story as it is told shortly after its occurrence. Ezekiel describes seeing a wheeled chariot descend toward him from the sky, piloted by beings with the likeness of a man. While many biblical versions of the story describe this being on the chariot as God, von Daniken points out that the original Hebrew version never mentions God. This word was added later. Ezekiel's description of the wheeled chariot landing sounds much like that of the landing of a spacecraft. The windstorm, flash of lightning, and brilliant lights are reminiscent of a spacecraft coming down for a landing and kicking up dirt in a spectacle never before seen by someone of such a primitive era. Ezekiel even describes the fire powering the chariot as appearing as glowing metal. I looked and I saw a windstorm coming out of the north, an immense cloud with flashing lightning and surrounded by brilliant light. The center of the fire looked like glowing metal, and in the fire was what looked like 4 living creatures. In appearance their form was human, but each of them had 4 faces and 4 wings. Their legs were straight, their feet were like those of a calf and gleamed like burnished bronze. Under their wings on their 4 sides they had human hands. All 4 of them had faces and wings, and the wings of one touched the wings of another. Each one went straight ahead, they did not turn as they moved. There is clearly some discrepancy between this description and much of the way Ezekiel's vision is portrayed in biblical artwork. Pictures often leave out the details involving the fire, omnidirectional wheels, and the vaulted crystal encasing over the heads of the human-like creatures. As I looked at the creatures, I saw a wheel on the ground beside each creature with its 4 faces. There was an appearance and structure of the wheels. They sparkled like topaz, and all 4 looked alike. Each appeared to be made like a wheel intersecting a wheel. As they moved, they would go in any one of 4 directions the creatures faced. The wheels did not change direction as the creatures went. Their rims were high and awesome, and all 4 rims were full of eyes all around. Spread out like the heads of the living creatures was what looked like something like a vault, sparkling like crystal and awesome. These creatures with the likeness of man then take Ezekiel with them in their craft, bringing him to a temple on top of the highest mountain. During his flight there, Ezekiel mentions feeling the hand of God on him, which could be interpreted as the forces of gravity or G-forces felt when lifting off. He is taken to these beings' temple, which is likely a staging area or city where they reside. Throughout an array of biblical stories, the Ark of the Covenant presents itself as an artifact of interest for von Daniken's theory, but its mention in the Kebra Nagast, an account of Christianity in Ethiopia under King Solomon, is where he sees the most relevancy. In this account, he says that it was known that King Solomon had flying machines that weren't mentioned in the Bible, as well as possession of the highly coveted Ark. These texts note that people were afraid of the Ark, as it often killed those who were in close contact with it. Was this because it was radioactive or electrically charged? Was the Ark of the Covenant a plutonium reactor? Eric von Daniken says that he believes there are other Bible verses that fit into his ancient astronaut theory, including some that hint at similar temples or landing areas for spacecraft, much like the one Ezekiel was brought to. One such temple, known as the Chavan de Huanta, can be found in Peru, sitting thousands of feet high on a mountain from a culture which of little is known. The temple is decorated with winged figures and sculpted heads that appear to be wearing helmets. Von Daniken says he believes those to be of a similar origin to those described by Ezekiel in the Bible. Is this actual evidence of ancient astronauts or an imaginative theory?